Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
AM 1470, WNN, with more of what you need to know. Don't miss Lisa Macy with the Justice Hour, Tuesdays at 1 and Saturdays at 3 on Health and Wealth Radio, AM 1470, WNN.
Staying healthy is difficult. What nutritional supplements should you take? What foods are best for you? What health practitioner should you see? You've got health questions, I've got health answers. From heartburn to hemorrhoids, pain to pimples, carpal tunnel to the common cold, gluten to gallbladder, and gingivitis, and all points in between. I'm Dr. Bob Martin. Tune into my Sunday talk show at 10 o'clock on Talk 1470 WNN.
What you want to know. What you need to know. Talk 1470 WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. The medical community has introduced new ideas and put forward some of the most unique cures in the history of mankind. Isn't it time that this information be found in one simple and easy to get to place? Introducing Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill. Dana has been in the medical community for over 15 years and is ready to bring the latest and greatest in the medical community. Each week, Dana will interview different doctors in different fields and will offer you, the public, to call in and ask questions that you need answers to. Call into the show, 888-565-1470, and feel free to ask the doctors any questions that you may have. All shows can be seen on amp2.tv or the WWNNradio.com website. Now, it's time to get informed. Here's Dana Hammill.
Good evening. My name is Dana Hammill, and you are listening to Stayin' Alive, the talk show designed to bring you the latest with what's happening in medicine. If you would like to call in tonight, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at 888-565-1470, and you can also watch our show on AMP2 TV and WWNNradio.com. Tonight, we're going to be having a very special guest with us, and we're going to be discussing a topic that everyone seems to be talking about right now, the Zika virus. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global public health emergency, and they are saying that as many as 4 million people worldwide could be affected by the end of this year. Officials at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have urged pregnant women against traveling to about 24 countries, mostly in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they're requesting that people stop traveling altogether because of this problem that's growing so quickly. To tell us more about what we should be aware of when it comes to Zika and how to protect ourselves and protect our families, we have Dr. Norina Ocampo. Dr. Ocampo has an office in Boca Raton with Tenet, Florida Physician Services and is on staff at West Boca Medical Center. Dr. Ocampo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Happy Monday.
Yes.
Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I can't even imagine what a day in the life of a pediatrician must be like.
Well, I'm a solo pediatrician. I've been in practice since 1992. And when I first started, I joined a practice, and then I decided to go on my own because I liked the personal care I could give, and I would see the same patients, and it was just better for me instead of being part of a large group. And I started my own practice in 1997, and I've been solo on my own ever since then.
Do you have kids?
Yes, I do. I have a daughter who's 21, and she is a senior in college, graduating in May, and I have a son who's 18, who's a freshman in college.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have guessed you had kids that age.
Thanks.
Can you advise parents when they're looking for a pediatrician, what should they be looking for? What kind of questions should they be asking?
Well, one of the big questions you want to ask is if a pediatrician is board certified. The board certification process means that a pediatrician completed a residency and then took an exam and passed the exam, and now you have board certification status. Other questions that parents should ask are basically office hours. Some parents need to have evening and weekend hours, and that's where a large group would be a better fit for them, because then they could bring their child or children on the evenings and weekends. Otherwise, like someone like me who's solo, I'm only open Monday through Friday from 8:30 until 5 p.m. But the advantage is I take my own call, and patients can always reach me evenings, weekends, and we can chat. And if I have to see someone on the weekends, I have come into the office to open the office for them to check out their child. So it really just depends on your family dynamic and what suits you best.
So if you're looking for a more personal touch, a solo practitioner like yourself might be the best fit. If you're looking for convenience and just a quick easy in, easy out, lots of hours, then maybe a group might be better. Is that what you're saying?
True. And this, I mean, and some of the larger groups, you still get to see your pediatrician most of the time, but if your pediatrician is not there, you may end up seeing someone else in the practice. But these groups, at least the ones here in Boca, they've been together a very long time, and they have really good dynamics among them. So I just decided that being solo and small was better for me because of my personality, and I just like to take care of my patients by myself.
I am also told you are multilingual, which is a huge asset in a pediatrician. What languages do you speak?
Actually, I speak Italian.
Nice.
That was my first language. I was born in this country, but my parents are from Italy, and I didn't know any English until I started kindergarten, and then I learned English in kindergarten, and I've tried to keep up the Italian, lost a little bit of the fluency, but the past few years I've been actually studying, listening to audio tapes and doing online audio discussions just to try to keep up my fluency.
Have you traveled to Italy before?
Well, as a family, growing up, we've been to Italy 5 times. My mom's entire family is still in Italy, so all my cousins are there on her side of the family. And then I got to go as a graduation gift from college. And then my husband and I, we were able to do a Mediterranean cruise and take our kids, and we saw parts of Italy. And then last year and the year before, I went with one of my closest friends, who was also my roommate in medical school. We did a girls' trip 2 years in a row, so we got to go to Italy, and it was very nice and generous of my husband to allow me to go.
Yay, hubby.
Yes.
Are you able to fool any natives that you, because of your accent? Like, are you? Is it a good accent when you learned it so young?
Well, I'll tell you, when after being there for a few days, the Italian starts flowing again, and a lot of people were asking me, so what part of Italy are you from? And when I told them the United States, they couldn't believe that my Italian fluency came back. And after you spend 2 weeks in Italy, it really comes back.
So I have a girlfriend who knew I was coming on the show with you, and she's pregnant right now, and she asked me to ask you a question. And
Sure.
no matter what group of women you get into, you can get fur flying when you bring up this topic, and it's about vaccinating babies.
Yes.
There is this huge fear that vaccinations can cause autism, ADHD, all those type of things. And yet there's a lot of research that says the research that told us that happened wasn't accurate. And so now there's just a ton of confusion. Where do you stand on this?
Actually, I am a big advocate of vaccinating children.
Okay.
The research that came out originally in 1998 was done by a physician in England, and he actually made up the results that the MMR vaccine caused autism. And there was
This has been proven. He made up the...
Yes.
Why would a physician do this?
Because he was trying to make his own vaccine and trying to convince the world that his vaccine was better than Merck's MMR vaccine. And also he received a lot of money from a law firm to promote his vaccine. And when his results came out showing that the MMR causes autism, it set the world into a tailspin, and many medical universities and medical institutions started to try to replicate his research. And after 10 years, when nobody could replicate his research, they demanded that he show his numbers, and when he finally admitted that he made it up, he lost his license to practice in the UK. He had received a medical license to practice in the United States. He lost his license to practice also in the United States. And the journal that had originally published the paper retracted the paper, and the American Academy of Pediatrics had an entire webpage dedicated to him, showing that his research was flawed and made up, and that the MMR vaccine does not cause autism.
Wow.
And since then, many institutions, including the Institute of Medicine, which is an independent organization, have conducted research trying to see if there was any difference in autism rates between vaccinated and unvaccinated children, and the results always come out the same. And probably to this day, over 100,000 children have been studied, and the results are always the same. There is no difference in the rate of autism in immunized versus unimmunized children. So we know it's not the vaccine. The other issue with the vaccines was thimerosal. Thimerosal is the inactive form of mercury, so it's inactive. It doesn't cause any problems in the body, but so many people were saying that their child was autistic because of the thimerosal. And finally, the American Academy of Pediatrics pulled out thimerosal from all the vaccines in 2001, 2002, and everybody was very upset at that time when the American Academy of Pediatrics agreed to allow thimerosal to be pulled out, stating, oh, you knew that this was a problem, and now you're finally taking it out, but it's too late. Our children are autistic. Well, we should have seen autism cases drop if that was the cause. Instead, autism cases have continued to rise, and with the removal of thimerosal, that was proven that it wasn't the thimerosal. And so we know now that autism is an environmental and genetic problem. Chromosome 16 has been implicated as a cause of autism in certain areas of the chromosome where it's damaged. And also environmentally, we know certain toxins in the air, women who live by heavily pesticided farmlands, we know those can cause autism. A recent article came out last year, at the end of last year, that showed women who have preeclampsia, hypertension during their pregnancy. Also, that can be a cause of autism, and we're thinking because of the hypertension, maybe there's decreased blood flow to the placenta. That decreased blood flow doesn't allow the brain to develop. So we're finding all of these other things right now that are causes of autism, but it's not the vaccines.
All right. So for our listeners that are pregnant, they should absolutely get the vaccines for their babies.
Yes. The problem that we're seeing right now is that with pockets of people in certain areas of the country that don't vaccinate, we are starting to see a resurgence of some of these diseases. Take the measles outbreak in California and Disneyland in October of 2014. That was pretty bad. We were fortunate that no baby died or no child died from that outbreak. And there may have been one case of encephalitis. Encephalitis is an inflammation of the brain, and when that happens, there usually is brain damage that is involved, and there really is no treatment, and you just hope that the child can recover and that the inflammation didn't cause any brain damage. But usually when there is encephalitis, there is brain damage, and it can be anywhere from mild to moderate to severe.
So the risk of having the vaccination, which in your opinion is 0 to nothing, should be done because the risk of catching one of these other viruses or diseases is huge.
It's still out there. The risk is still out there. And vaccines aren't 100% safe, but they are about as safe as we can get them. Can you still have a bad side effect from a vaccine? Yes. You can have a child who can develop encephalitis from the actual MMR vaccine. The MMR vaccine is a live but attenuated, weakened virus.
Okay.
However, that risk is between 1 out of 3 million to 1 out of 5 million.
Very rare.
But the risk of contracting measles in this country is still 1 in the several 100,000. So the risk of the real disease is much higher, catching the real disease is much higher than the risk of getting an adverse event from the vaccine. And the issue right now is that we do have a government agency called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So if a child does have a bad side effect or a bad outcome from a vaccine, the pediatrician's responsibility is to report that to VAERS, and the VAERS infectious disease doctors investigate, and if they feel that something happened to the child, that family will receive money for the child's care for the rest of that child's life. And so we do have policies in place in case there was a bad event from a vaccine, but the risk of catching the real disease is so much higher than the risk of anything bad happening from the vaccine, which is why we really need to vaccinate. And we can eliminate these vaccine preventable illnesses. We've already eliminated smallpox. That was eliminated back in the 1980s. No one gets a smallpox vaccine anymore.
That's the one that leaves a scar on your arm, right?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
My mom has that.
Exactly. And then polio, the goal was to eliminate polio by 2000. The World Health Organization had set the year 2000 as the goal to eliminate polio. Well, unfortunately, because of the AIDS virus, a lot of the African and Middle Eastern countries, when our health teams went in to vaccinate, they felt that their AIDS epidemic was because we were injecting the AIDS virus into the polio vaccine, which wasn't true. And so they stopped vaccinating, and then we started to see polio rise in those countries. And now the goal is to try to eliminate polio by 2018. So we're 18 years behind when we could have eliminated it completely. And if we can get everyone on board with the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, we can eliminate those viruses too. We'll never see measles encephalitis or someone dying from measles, or women getting rubella while they're pregnant and their babies being brain damaged from rubella in utero. So we can eliminate these viruses if we can get everybody on board to vaccinate.
Well, speaking of viruses and travels and vaccinations, this brings us to our main topic tonight, which is the Zika virus. But before we get started on that, why don't we go and take a quick commercial break? Listeners, be sure to stay tuned, as you're not going to want to miss any of this information.
If you are a medical provider, doctor, or just have something you have created or know about and want to share it with the entire community, call Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill at 866-224-5422 and share your information with us. AMP2.TV wants to interview those in the medical profession so you can bring the latest information that everyone needs to know. If you're a doctor who has created a new concept in medicine or a company that offers medical assistance, AMP wants to hear from you. Call 866-224-5422 today and get on Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill and let the community know what's going on. Times are tough, and right now those in the commercial world know that being heard via advertisements is the name of the game. AmpSquare.tv understands how important advertisement is and is proud to express that it's truly the only plugged-in internet television production company on the market. Amp2.tv live streams all their shows across all the major selling markets in the U.S. and abroad. Call them at 866-224-5422. The AmpSquare.tv library allows productions to be seen over and over again, making commercial platforms more usable. Call 866-224-5422. Toll free 866-224-5422. Amp2.tv, the first and only internet television network that's truly plugged in. 866-224-5422. That's AMP2.TV. You are listening to Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill, who has been in the medical community for over 15 years. If you want to call into the show, call 888-565-1470 and ask Dana about anything you want more information on. Now, back to our show.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Staying Alive show on WWNN Radio. For any listeners who have just joined us, we have renowned pediatrician Dr. Norina Ocampo with us this evening to help us understand how to protect ourselves and our families from the Zika virus. Dr. Ocampo, the Zika virus is not a new virus. I mean, we all just started hearing about it, but this is nothing new. My understanding is it's been around since the 1950s, but has just started making its way over to us because of the influx of the mosquito population and people traveling more.
Right.
My understanding is the virus has now reached pandemic levels, and that the situation has become so serious that certain countries, including El Salvador, who's dealing heavily with this virus right now, has advised women to avoid becoming pregnant until 2018. How crazy is this? How do you tell an entire country full of women not to get pregnant for the next 2 years?
It's actually really scary right now. The virus has reached international levels, and within Brazil, they started linking the virus as the possible cause of all of these babies being born microcephalic. Microcephaly is an underdevelopment of the brain, so they're born with these really small heads. And the heads are small because the brains are small. The brains didn't develop. If the brain doesn't grow, the skull doesn't grow. And so I read about El Salvador doing that, and it's a health concern because when these babies are born microcephalic, most of them will have some form of brain damage, developmental delay. It could range from mild to moderate to severe. And the healthcare costs involved in taking care of these babies and the therapies that they need, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, developmental therapy, will just be a huge cost to the consumers and to the government. And I think they are targeting 2018. A vaccine is possibly being worked on at this point to see if we can vaccinate against this virus to protect you, because, again, vaccines work. If you give a vaccine, you make antibodies against the vaccine. The vaccine is the way to trick the body into thinking you're getting the real infection. And most of our vaccines are killed. And so the body's immune system can't tell the difference between live or dead. It just recognizes the foreign virus or the foreign bacteria coming in and says, oh, we're getting infected, let's make antibodies. So then if you get bitten by a mosquito that's carrying the infection, your body already has the antibodies in place to attack and kill that virus.
So is the virus only transmitted by mosquitoes?
Mostly transmitted by mosquitoes, but there have been cases reported where it can be transmitted sexually. The virus does live in men's semen, and it seems to live longer in the semen than it does in our blood. And there's also been cases reported where the mother was infected and it was transmitted down to the baby.
Okay, so if I got infected with the virus, what would the symptoms be? How would I know it?
Well, about 80% of people are actually asymptomatic. 20% of people may have a rash, fever, body aches, maybe a headache, maybe red eyes. We would call that pink eye or conjunctivitis. And it just looks like a normal everyday virus, and the symptoms are usually gone within 3 to 7 days. And most people don't go to the hospital, go to their doctor with those symptoms because they're mild. Fever can be low grade, and then they're fine. After you've been infected, and if you had symptoms, or even if you didn't have symptoms, your body will make antibodies to the natural live virus that infected you. And right now we're thinking that if you were infected, those antibodies will give you lifelong immunity. But if you are infected and don't realize that it's the Zika virus that's infected you and a mosquito bites you, the mosquito draws up your blood while it inserts its venom into you, and it picks up your infected blood, and now it can go and bite someone else and infect that person. And that's how it's been getting transmitted. When it was first discovered, actually in 1947 in Uganda, and then the first documented person to have it was in 1952 in Uganda, we weren't a very international world at that point. People didn't travel, but over the past 20 years, we've become very good at traveling around the world and carrying all of these viruses and infections around the world. So right now in Florida, we have 60 cases, but none of them have been from a mosquito that's in Florida that has infected us. All of the Florida cases were people who traveled, got bitten by mosquitoes somewhere in Africa or in South America or Central America, and then brought it back. And so the goal right now is to try to prevent that person from spreading it. So if you're outside, you need to be wearing bug repellent, insect repellent spray, so you won't get bitten by a mosquito who could possibly have picked up the virus from a person who is infected.
So is what you're saying, are pregnant women and their unborn babies really the only ones at risk for the rest of us if we get bit and we're not planning on getting pregnant, or you're a male who's not planning on getting a woman pregnant? Is it really no big deal then? You get the virus, you recover from the virus, and then you have immunity to the virus?
That's what we're thinking right now, that if you were infected and you made antibodies, that you are pretty much protected. So even if you get bitten again, your body has the antibodies to kill that virus immediately without it setting up another infection in your blood. But the biggest concern right now is pregnant women, because we think that if a pregnant woman gets infected while she's pregnant, that virus somehow must do something to the body, release a toxin or something, and gets into the baby, into the growing baby in the uterus, and somehow affects their brain, and their brain doesn't develop.
I understand that in some cases, Zika can cause a temporary paralysis. Have you heard of this?
Yes, there have been some cases that they think are linked with Guillain-Barré syndrome. Guillain-Barré is a temporary paralysis. It's an ascending paralysis, so you start getting weakness and paralysis first in your lower extremities, your feet, your ankles. It moves up your legs, and it can move up your entire body. And in the most severe cases, it can actually affect your respiratory system, and you can't breathe. And those people have to be put on a ventilator. Almost no one really dies from Guillain-Barré, but even if you get that severe infection with needing a respirator or ventilator, that's just supportive care until your body can get rid of the toxin effect of the Zika virus, and then you recover. Some people will still have a residual weakness from having Guillain-Barré, but most people do recover without a problem.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap. If I understand, the Zika virus is carried by mosquitoes, and at this point in time, it's mostly in the Caribbean and Latin American countries.
Yes.
Most people, if they become infected, will have mild to no symptoms. But if a pregnant woman contracts the virus, this is the problem, because it can cause a very dangerous birth defect called microcephaly.
Correct.
Which can cause her baby to be born with a small head. And since the head is small, the brain doesn't develop naturally and can have mild to severe brain damage type symptoms that they have to deal with for life. If a baby is born with microcephaly, is there any treatments that can be done?
Well, the treatments at this point would be supportive, and it would be therapies. As I mentioned before, it would be physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, developmental and behavioral therapy, to try to still wire that brain to have that baby reach its maximum potential. But we won't know the severity of the developmental delay and the brain damage until that child gets older. Two children can be born with the same small microcephalic head, and one can be severely developmentally delayed, and one may be mildly developmentally delayed. And there is a small percentage of babies who are born microcephalic and have no developmental delays at all, and they're fine.
Have you ever seen a baby that was born microcephalic?
Yes, I have. And this one mother had toxoplasmosis during her pregnancy, and it affected...
That's from cat litter, right?
Yes, cats or cat litter, yes.
I'm a total cat lady. Well, many women are.
Yes.
So because of that caused the microcephaly.
Yes, it did. And there are other viruses that can also cause microcephaly in babies, but right now, and they're very rare. It's very rare to see that. But the Zika virus is changing those statistics right now.
Most Americans, I mean, I myself didn't think I had ever had any exposure to microcephaly. And there's actually an entertainer in the radio world that has it. He's on the Howard Stern show, and I think he goes by Beetlejuice. But I looked up his condition, and it turns out he has it. So many of us have been exposed to this and have seen it before. It's not completely uncommon to our world. Is there, if you have to go to one of these countries, is there a type of vaccine or something you can take to help protect you?
There's no vaccine available at this point.
Okay.
I'm sure there are medical universities working on trying to develop a vaccine, but right now there is no vaccine. The best thing that you could do is to wear mosquito repellent and long sleeves and long pants. And unfortunately, these mosquitoes come out in the daytime, so they're daytime biters. Well, as most of our mosquitoes here in South Florida, we're used to getting bitten at nighttime when we go out. So you would really have to avoid going out in the daytime. They can also bite at nighttime, but they are more daytime biters. So you'd have to really wear the insect repellent and the long sleeve clothes.
Is that enough? I mean, in your opinion, if there was a young woman who was looking to get pregnant in the next couple of years, would you just tell her not to go travel to these areas?
Yes, I would.
Wow. All right. Before we go on any further, why don't we go ahead and take a commercial break? Listeners, be sure and stay tuned. We have lots more information to share, and we will be right back.
Times are tough, and right now those in the commercial world know that being heard via advertisements is the name of the game. AmpSquare.tv understands how important advertisement is and is proud to express that it's truly the only plugged-in internet television production company on the market. Amp2.tv live streams all their shows across all the major selling markets in the U.S. and abroad. Call them at 866-224-5422. The AmpSquare.tv library allows productions to be seen over and over again, making commercial platforms more usable. Call 866-224-5422. Toll free 866-224-5422. Amp2.tv, the first and only internet television network that's truly plugged in. 866-224-5422. That's AMP2.TV. If you are a medical provider, doctor, or just have something you have created or know about and want to share it with the entire community, call Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill at 866-224-5422 and share your information with us. Amp2.tv wants to interview those in the medical profession so you can bring the latest information that everyone needs to know. If you're a doctor who has created a new concept in medicine or a company that offers medical assistance, AMP wants to hear from you. Call 866-224-5422 today and get on Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill and let the community know what's going on. You are listening to Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill, who has been in the medical community for over 15 years. If you want to call into the show, call 888-565-1470 and ask Dana about anything you want more information on. Now, back to our show.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Stayin' Alive show on WWNN Radio with Dana Hammill, and tonight we are talking about the Zika virus. Again, our number here is 888-565-1470, and we invite you to call and share your concerns or questions that you may have with our guest, Dr. Ocampo. We want to quickly add that the segment of Staying Alive with Dr. Ocampo has been brought to you by Tenet Florida Physician Services, and we want to thank them for making this show possible. All right, let's talk about some facts. The Federal Centers for Disease Control have reported over 193 cases of the Zika virus in the U.S. Our local Florida headlines tell us that there are 58 cases of Zika virus in Florida and that 27 of them are found right here in Miami. The state reported its first case of sexually transmitted Zika virus this week, and we know that 4 pregnant women in Florida have contracted the virus. This virus is no joke, and we need to be aware of it. We are thrilled to have local pediatrician Dr. Norino Ocampo with us this evening to help us understand what we need to do. So, Dr. Ocampo, before we left for a break, you were telling us more about Zika, how to protect ourselves. Most Americans probably don't think that it's as impactful as it is, but in Florida we have the Aedes mosquito, which is the same mosquito that transmits this virus.
Yes.
So for me, although the news reports I've been hearing is that we are at a low level of concern, this isn't huge for the mainland United States, I don't know if I agree with that. What do you think?
Well, according to the CDC, we are expecting more cases to keep developing, and at some point we will probably see that we are going to have our own mosquitoes contracting the Zika virus from an infected person and transmitting it to another person.
Have you heard about a company called Oxitec?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Oxitec was just approved by the federal government on Friday to release genetically engineered mosquitoes in an investigational trial into the Florida Keys. This concerns me. It seems that these mosquitoes, the males have been engineered so that the offspring that they produce will die in a very short period of time. So the idea is that these mosquitoes go out into the mosquito world, mate with females mosquitoes, and these females have babies that just don't live, thereby effectively kind of killing or slowly killing off the species. But
Okay.
what about the fish that eat these genetically engineered mosquitoes? I mean, what does that do? And what about the babies that these fish have? And what about the people that catch the fish and then eat, we as humans? Doesn't this sound kind of scary to you?
It does. But the reality is we're already eating food that is genetically modified, and a lot of us don't even realize that. And the FDA has done studies and claims that a lot of these foods are safe and there's really nothing to worry about. So I'm guessing that this company has probably done studies with these mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are bad. The worrisome part is that this family of mosquitoes not only transmits the Zika virus, but it also transmits the chikungunya virus and the dengue virus.
Dengue, yeah.
Then you have mosquitoes that transmit malaria. Malaria is the number one mosquito killer in the United States. I mean, in the world. I'm sorry, not in the United States. We don't have malaria here. But now we may start seeing mosquitoes transmitting these other viruses, which can be scary. I just don't know enough to comment about the modified mosquitoes, but at the same time, maybe the shorter lifespan will help decrease the risk of transmission.
I read that in Brazil, let's talk about Brazil for a moment.
Okay.
In a normal year, they usually have about 150 cases of babies born with small heads due to microcephaly. Right now, they are investigating 4,000 babies that just since October have been born with microcephaly. In Brazil, we know they have poor access to birth control, abortion isn't even legal there. So in your opinion, does public policy need to be changed regarding women's reproductive rights in order to help manage the outbreak?
Well, that's a tricky question because you are impinging on somebody's civil rights and their right to have children. But I think education is the key at this point, and we need to educate women, and if they can hold off on having children until we can figure out how to get this Zika virus under control. Because having a baby who is born microcephalic with brain damage and developmental delays and disabilities puts a huge burden on the family, emotionally, physically, economically. And so I think we need to start educating and seeing if we can try to hold off on pregnancies or try to decrease the number of pregnancies, and also educating with using insect repellent and avoid going outside in the daytime and when there seems to be more of the mosquitoes around, so that we can try to prevent transmission of this virus.
Being that Brazil is one of the most affected countries, what do you think of the Summer Olympics being held in Rio de Janeiro? Some athletes have expressed concern in even attending.
I was reading about that.
Yeah.
I was also reading some other issues with the water not being safe for the swimmers, and that they couldn't get the water cleaned up for the athletes who would be swimming and diving. I think it's a big concern, and if a woman is of childbearing age, she might have to think about it. But on the other side, we think we know right now that if a female athlete was to get bitten by the Zika virus and doesn't get pregnant within the 7 days after, once she has antibodies and is protected, then it should be okay afterwards for her to have babies. So we have to assume that these athletes are not pregnant and not going to get pregnant while they're competing in the games. But it's scary because we don't really know. We think that getting infected with the virus, if you're not pregnant, will give you immunity and you should not get it again. But not everybody's immune system is perfect, and you can get something a second time.
So there really is that small of a window. If you get infected by the Zika virus and you've expressed symptoms, and once those symptoms end, maybe another 7 days. So you're talking about maybe in total, 14 days?
Maybe, and probably even less, because most viruses can't live in our bodies. Usually by 5 to 7 days, with most viruses, we're not considered contagious anymore. Our immune system kicks in, kills the virus. Virus is gone, but now we have antibodies to protect us. So
30 days out, if you get pregnant, just because you had Zika, doesn't mean you're going to have a baby with any issues.
Correct. That's what we're thinking right now, that if you
Okay.
actually have the antibodies, as we have antibodies to so many other viruses and bacteria that we've been infected with over time. And those antibodies don't hurt the baby. It's the actual live virus infection that we think is hurting the unborn baby.
And is there a test? So if someone suspects they might have Zika, is there an actual blood test or something that can be done to prove it one way or the other, or is it just...
Well, our health departments have asked us, the CDC has asked the health departments to work with doctors, and if a doctor suspects that a patient has the Zika virus, we are to direct them to the local county or state health department where they can actually get their blood drawn, and it's sent to a specific lab where it can be tested to see if they have the Zika virus. It is not a commercially available lab test. You can't just go to your lab, like Quest or LabCorp, to get the test done. It has to be done through the state at this point.
And so for a young female who's not pregnant and not planning to get pregnant, in your opinion, is it okay if she goes to an infected country?
Well, I have to say my daughter just got back from Costa Rica. She had this vacation planned on her spring break last week with several of her girlfriends, and I told her to use mosquito repellent and just to be careful, but she went and she came back and she's fine and said she didn't get any mosquito bites, and she's not married, but she's 21, and she's of childbearing age, but not pregnant, and we're planning to get pregnant anytime soon. But I think if you are married and there's a possibility, or if you're in a committed relationship and there's a possibility you could get pregnant, you're not on birth control, and it would probably be judicious to get on birth control first and then use, as I've been stating, the mosquito repellents to try to avoid getting bitten by the mosquito that carries the virus.
And for someone who comes back to the United States and they do find out they're infected, what is the current treatments?
There really is no treatment. It's supportive care. We don't have any medicine to treat it. And if you're pregnant and you think you got it, again, we have to go to your local state, county, state health department.
Will they quarantine you?
That hasn't been discussed yet. What they're asking is that you use mosquito repellent so you don't get bitten, so the mosquito can't pick up the infection from you and transmit it to somebody else.
That's awfully trusting, though. I would think if we know someone actually has the virus, they need to stay inside until we know that they don't have the virus. Since you said it's only 7 to 14 days or whatever it is.
Right. Well, I guess because the virus doesn't cause fatalities, that would probably be a really aggressive way to try to treat this. It's not like Ebola, when workers came from Africa and we thought they were infected with Ebola and they were put into mandatory quarantine until we knew they didn't have the virus or until they were out of the danger period, because that can cause severe fatalities. But since this isn't causing anyone to die, I don't know if the quarantine will actually be something that they will consider.
What is your prognosis for what's going to happen in the United States? In your opinion, for the most part, are we probably going to be fine? Or do you think that this could get very serious very quickly?
I think it can get pretty serious. We're entering into the summer months and more people will be traveling. And the fact that we already have just about 60 cases in Florida, and it's just getting more and more. These are all people who've traveled outside and brought the virus back, but at some point, someone will probably be bitten by this mosquito, and that mosquito will get that virus and then give it to somebody else.
Dr. Ocampo, is there anything else tonight that you'd wanted to discuss before we kind of wrap up? Is there anything about Zika or anything about vaccinations or your practice that you wanted to bring up?
Anything specific you'd like me to mention?
Do you have a website?
Yes, I do. And it's through Tenet Florida Physician Services. I joined Tenet a couple of months ago because in today's medical marketplace, it's really hard to be a solo practitioner and maintain contracts with insurance companies. And joining Tenet has allowed me to stay with my contracts and allowed me to practice as a solo practitioner and just practice the way I've been practicing for the past 20 years.
If our listeners have any other questions about how to keep their children healthy, Can they call your office?
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yes, anytime.
What's your office number?
It's 561-487-5437.
Dr. Ocampo, it has been a pleasure speaking with you and
thank
learning
you.
from you. Please come again and visit us soon. Listeners, remember to join us every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. on WWNN Radio. Please stay tuned because we're going to be talking to David DePino. Thank you so much.
If you are a medical provider, doctor, or just have something you have created or know about and want to share it with the entire community, call Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill at 866-224-5422 and share your information with us. AMP2.TV wants to interview those in the medical profession so you can bring the latest information that everyone needs to know. If you're a doctor who has created a new concept in medicine or a company that offers medical assistance, AMP wants to hear from you. Call 866-224-5422 today and get on Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill and let the community know what's going on. Times are tough, and right now those in the commercial world know that being heard via advertisements is the name of the game. AmpSquare.tv understands how important advertisement is and is proud to express that it's truly the only plugged-in internet television production company on the market. Amp2.tv live streams all their shows across all the major selling markets in the U.S. and abroad. Call them at 866-224-5422. The AmpSquare.tv library allows productions to be seen over and over again, making commercial platforms more usable. Call 866-224-5422. Toll free 866-224-5422. Amp2.tv, the first and only internet television network that's truly plugged in. 866-224-5422. That's AMP2.TV. You are listening to Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill, who has been in the medical community for over 15 years. If you want to call into the show, call 888-565-1470 and ask Dana about anything you want more information on. Now, back to our show.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Stayin' Alive show on WWNN Radio. And tonight we are talking to David DePino, Public Relations Specialist with Tenet Florida Physician Services. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me, Dana. I appreciate it.
What is a Public Relations Specialist?
So a Public Relations Specialist focuses on getting our doctors out in the community. Obviously, we provide them as experts in a TV, newspaper, radio environment, and also it encompasses a little bit of the care that they provide. We provide testimonials on patient care. A good example would be a doctor or a patient that had a great experience with our physician. Said, "Hey, Dr. Ocampo, is there anything I can do to tell more people about the care you provide? I'm really excited." I would come in and do a testimonial for them as well. So it's not only the TV, radio, and newspaper side of things, it's getting the word out about them in the community.
How many physicians are currently with the Tenet Network?
We have 160 right now. I came on board about 3 years ago with Tenet Florida Physician Services, and we had 70. So we've grown substantially.
What's the best thing about your job?
Every day is different. I know that's kind of a cliche, and you hear that in a lot of different industries. But I could be on TV with a cardiothoracic surgeon explaining a minimally invasive heart procedure that he did by only inch incision and saved a person's life.
Wow.
And later on in the day, I may be with an orthopedic surgeon or a pediatrician. I mean, it's so many different medical specialties that we cover that it makes every day different.
All right, David, what's the worst thing about your job? No pressure, because there's only about 3,000 people that are going to be hearing your answer right now.
The worst thing, I think, is trying to do too much. You kind of want to let the doctors, these are obviously very highly educated individuals because they've done the schooling, and put them in the right position to accelerate and do a great job.
Yeah.
That's what, if I can explain just briefly, we're an employed physician group. So really what we want our doctors to do is put on their lab coat and provide care. We take care of everything else, PR, marketing, real estate. So I think that's the most important thing to do.
So what you're saying is it lets doctors focus on what they've always wanted to do, which is be a doctor and not run a business, which is what many practices the doctors have to end up doing, is running a business.
Which can be tough. Like right out of fellowship, it can be tough to build a business if you've never done that before. On the other end of it is, maybe a physician who's getting closer to retirement age, maybe has 5 years left. They don't maybe want the headache of the staffing, the real estate, that kind of thing. So those are two, age groups that really, appeal to us. But then you have everywhere in between, maybe a doctor who wants to focus more on care than the everyday aspect of it, would be perfect for an employed physician group.
Obviously, Tenet Florida is within the state of Florida, but does Tenet also go outside of the state of Florida? Do you have other groups of
Yes,
Tenet?
we're global, mostly in the United States. Tenet Florida Physician Services is part of, which we call TFPS as the acronym, is part of Tenet Physician Resources nationally. TPR, we have physician group markets in Chicago, Philadelphia, the southern states region. We're Florida, Texas, California. Those are some of the big markets. And then every one of our physicians belongs to the Tenet Healthcare Network in Florida. So that's 10 hospitals across Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Broward counties. We also have ambulatory surgery centers in the United Kingdom, and it's just grown. We're the second biggest healthcare company in the United States.
Oh, I didn't realize that. You guys are huge.
Huge. I think it's over 100 hospitals in the United States.
And I understand you do some writing, both for the position you're in and personally.
I do. I've been writing professionally since 1999.
What kind of writing are we talking about?
Well, I started out as a newspaper reporter. I worked at a community college that didn't have any sports, which made me, as a sports enthusiast, made me learn about, writing about the choir or janitorial strike, which actually opened tons of doors for me and actually got me a job at the Orlando Sentinel in the sports department.
Oh, perfect.
So it kind of went full circle there, but I've been writing since I was 5 years old. I mean, I'm kind of a big guy. I played high school football, and I thought, that'd be my kind of golden ticket. But when it came down to it and I was 19 years old, I said, this is really what I want to do. I want to go after this. And I became passionate about writing, and I've written for over 50 newspapers, combination of, 50 newspapers, magazines since then. And my goal is to have 1 million words in print.
Nice. What kind of writing do you like best? Do you like the article type writing, or do you like blog writing, or are you ever going to do a novel someday?
I'm really, my goal would be to do a book of short stories. I grew up reading Ernest Hemingway like a lot of writers did, but it wasn't the real lengthy Ernest Hemingway books that really kind of tickled my fancy. It was the Nick Adams stories, the short stories about, there's a great couple stories about these Indians in the Midwest. And I liked how he was able in 15 pages to just grasp the reader and tell an amazing story. And then it's something you could finish that night. So I think short stories, and with the way the world's going and our attention span, it's probably not a bad idea to stick with short stories. But I think there's one big novel in there, hopefully someday.
Is there a formula to short stories? I've heard of writing groups that come together and they start with a type of formula and then get creative from there. Do you agree with that, or do you think no, that's not really the way to do it?
Well, that may be so. I think it's, to everyone, but I think the important thing is to write every day, and be around other writers and other people in the field. Take advantage of the writing groups at the library that are free. That's something I do at the Delray Beach Public Library. I think it's more important that way to go after it. I think everyone has to develop their own style. Obviously, I kind of write under that Ernest Hemingway short story style, so that I learned just on my own reading. So I think it could be different for everyone.
David, are you single?
No, I'm married.
Oh, do you agree that in general people are happier when they're in a couple than when they're on their own?
I mean, for me, it works. I'm much more happier. I have a beautiful wife. She's actually a pastry chef.
Oh, yum.
So, and that's a whole other story for another time.
Yes.
I spent time in 22 restaurants. I worked as a fry cook when I started out in high school and college, and went all the way up to a sous chef. And we actually met at the second to last restaurant I worked at. And she was actually like the garde manger and salad and
Can you
desserts.
say that again? Oh, the what?
Garde manger, it's salads and
know
desserts.
this. Okay.
And I was working on a wood-fired pizza oven, and we met in the kitchen. So I still
Was it
help
love
her
at
out.
first sight? Like, really? Did you see her and
Yeah.
you're like, damn.
Yeah, it was the first time that ever happened. So I knew right then and
Wow.
there. And she was in a chef coat too, so I just knew. But she specializes in paleo, gluten-free, and regular and vegan sweets. Her business is Love Katie Cakes. We do the Delray Green Market every Saturday. And although I can't do it physically in the kitchen anymore and putting in those long days, I get to do it on, Saturdays and Sundays helping her out. And that's a lot of fun. So my passion really is cooking too. I did cook in 22 restaurants.
Lovely.
But physically, I can't do it anymore. Those guys and gals are
Why
unbelievable.
physically? Because the standing? Is that what the killer is? Or is it the hours?
It has to do with the standing. It's the shuffling of the feet. I played football for a long time, and the shuffling of the feet when you're busy like that, it really it takes your back out of whack and your legs. I had a bad back when I was cooking.
And what's the deal with chefs and drinking? Like, every chef I know is a total alcoholic. And it's part of the, chef culture is what they tell me. Is this true?
It is true, unfortunately. I think it's just getting off late and that camaraderie. We know what you did 1,000 dinners with this great crew, and you guys really knocked it out of the park, and you were a team. It's such a team-oriented position. So I think that's it. But I'll tell you what, since I got out of the business, I don't really even drink at all. My wife will tell you I barely drink compared to when she met me.
Compared to when you were in it. So it's almost like a pressure cooker of there's so much stress and so much excitement that when you get off, everyone wants to hang out, because what are you going to do? Go to bed then, or go out clubbing?
And you're getting off at late times too.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to do with it. You guys are all together. It's 12:01, 1 o'clock in the morning. There's really nothing else to do. So, and everyone's staying up. But it was fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So what do you think of the culinary scene in South Florida as compared to New York or San Francisco or some of those bigger cities? Do you think we can compare and hold our own, or not quite?
I think if we stick to the dishes, that in this area, like Floridian is something that I've always been amazed with, the way we can combine the tropics and the Florida flair.
The first time I heard that. I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
That's my book, How I Made It Floridian. I'm working on it.
Love it. Okay, I will buy this.
But, New York has its own, very specialized ethnic groups. And I've been to New York City a few times just to eat. I went to Mamafuku, which is David Chang's restaurant.
Nice. So, quick question for you. If there was anything that you could do, what would it be in terms of your next movement in career?
I like to start a band. We talked to Dr. Hirsch last week. That's something I've always wanted to do. I play guitar, so.
Oh, nice. Do you also sing?
No, I'm not a good singer.
Do you write songs?
I do write songs. I have a lot.
Wow. Okay, so what kind of music? What would the sound be like?
Pearl Jam's my favorite band, so if I could do anything grunge rock, that'd be great.
You could bring the whole grunge rock scene back.
It's got to come back. It was great.
So how many times have you seen Pearl Jam, if they're your favorite?
16 times.
16 times? Oh my God.
Correct.
How many times have they been here in Florida?
Probably 16.
Listeners, I wanted to thank you for listening tonight. We hope to hear from you next week. Be sure and call into our show, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks for listening and watching Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill. Please join us next week when Dana brings another professional in the medical community who will tell us what they are currently working on to improve your quality of life. Follow Dana on Facebook at Stayin' Alive with Dana Hammill, or visit her website, www.stayinalivewithdanahammill.tv. See you next week, and may you stay healthy. The opinions expressed on the preceding